the preset recordings do expire, so we actually have to take them and move them somewhere else to stop that happening. So
I guess that saves you from doing it for each quarter as well.
yeah,
I
it's
think.
a little bit of an issue with the privacy. So if we obviously ask everyone and telling them that we're recording it, but if we go and then chuck it on YouTube, it's
Yeah.
it's a little bit grey in terms of your privacy. Suddenly your name's on YouTube without your direct consent for that to happen. So that's a little bit of an issue in terms of sharing it all over the place. But I may just end up doing some brief, like sessions where I just talk to the PowerPoint without someone else there and record that and
Yeah.
throw that up. So it's sort of kind of achieve the same thing. It's just more work to do that's not high priority at the moment. Anyway, so tonight the topic is installation, maintenance of sanitary fixtures and appliances. So we've got a couple of different PowerPoints through that, and then let's look at some of the question content as well. A quick overview of some of the problem areas that might come across when you do the test.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll outline from a theoretical point of view at least the basics of installing sanitary fixtures and maybe some of the maintenance requirements as well. In terms of building code documents, G1 covers personal hygiene. So that's got minimum requirements of what's required, where things go, sort of thing. Disabled bathrooms. E3 covers internal moisture, so waterproofing issues and stuff like that. G12 is a big one for the plumbing sector, if you like. So that's got water supplies, all your hot water systems. It's got solar stuff, specific stuff in it, backflow, which is an important one, and then just general installation of pipework, stuff like that. G13 foul water. Realistically, not that many new installations are installed to comply with G13. For a domestic house, it's quite workable. You just run the drains outside and have a gully dish out there and run the waste pipes into the gully. You can go up to 3.5 meters, which is quite a long way. Usually the bathrooms by the external wall, so there's a window and you got, it's not really a problem, so it can do everything you want to do. But in a lot of more intensive builds, multi-units, certainly any commercial multi-story stuff, it will be designed at AS3500 Part 2, which gives a bit more flexibility in terms of design, allows for floor waste gullies and fixtures discharging those within the space. So it's a lot more flexible. Typically, it would reduce the need for vents and allow you to have branch drains with more loading and stuff like that. So most systems are probably designed to that standard. It's also most of that document, AS3500 Part 2, is an acceptable solution. It tells you that in a portion of G13, which bits are and which bits aren't. New Zealand Building Code G1 describes sanitary fixtures as sanitary, meaning hygienic and clean. The sanitary fixture is something which is used for sanitation, and being a fixture, it's also permanently attached to the building. So it's part of the building, comes with the building if you're going to buy the building.
Right.
Unless it's a bare building, if it's got a fixture, the fixture is staying there. So they call them chatels or things like that. But so a sanitary appliance like a dishwasher or a washing machine it's not actually a fixture, it's an appliance. So they're like transportable. You can pick them up, move them, take them somewhere else, sort of thing. With a toilet, unless you're a plumber, you're not going to do that. So it's there as a permanent thing.
Right.
A soil fixture is a special type of sanitary fixture that's only going to receive solid or liquid human excrement. So most obvious one is a toilet or a water closet, as they like to call it in all the plumbing documents.
Yeah, it took me. I wasn't too sure what that was.
Yeah, so it's basically an old-fashioned term for a toilet.
Yeah.
Because in the olden days, they used to just have a hole in the backyard or whatever, go out there and take a dump, sort of thing, or they had, some other way in cities. Basically, you dumped in a bucket and tipped it out to some cart that some guy pulled around in a horse, and he'd go dump it down the river. Quite often poisoning their water supplies. So when they invented toilets, that was, amazing invention. So sort of that's where the name comes from. But general speak, everyone calls it a toilet nowadays. So there's a few other weird names that you might not have heard of. Especially, sometimes you might have, if you did a commercial like a hospital or something, you might come across them. But other than that, you probably don't know what they are, even if you saw one. So a bedpan disposal unit. So in the olden days, when you had an external toilet, people used to have a ceramic thing they kept under their bed. So if they need to go to the toilet at night time, they'd take a piss in that and then get up in the morning and go empty it out.
Yeah.
In a hospital, they quite often typically use like a cardboard bedpan. In some cases, they might have stainless steel ones, and they've got a special machine that will clean it and or dispose of it. So basically, that's where you pick up your bowl full of shit and tip it. And it's the flushing type system like a toilet.
Right.
Slop sinks are something very similar. Urinal, you'll know, and you get single stool or the ceramic individual ones, or a multi-stool stainless steel ones. Sports grounds and stuff. And I don't think these are particularly common, but potentially a water flush sanitary towel disposal. So that's basically a machine that's going to get rid of sanitary pads or those sorts of things. Usually they just go into a container that goes into rubbish. Most common toilets, but there is such a thing that potentially would flush them down the toilet. So other things covered in G1, and you can find G1, just search NZBC G1. It'll pop up. If you just search NZBC, you'll probably get the list of all the building codes. Yeah, it's a free document, fairly easy to get hold of. So it tells you the number and type of fixtures required. So if the building's got different uses, particularly a commercial building, depending on what the use is, it may, if it's a sports stadium or something, it may legally be required to have X amount of toilets. If it's an office block, it might have a different ratio to work out how many toilets they've got to have. And that would be covered in G1. What the fixture must be constructed in terms of minimum. So that's things like water seal depths in a toilet may be in there. Any other requirements. Where they need to go might be a requirement to have a door in between a toilet and another room, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And specific requirements for disabled toilets. So there's quite
like more space for them and stuff like that.
Yeah. So any public building, even commercial building like an office block or something, will have a requirement that it's got to have X amount of disabled facilities. And they have to comply with those quite specific requirements. So there is a certain, so the toilet requirements are slightly different. So Coroma is one example that make a Kia pan, so quite a bit more expensive than a normal one. Sometimes in some buildings they might put like a wall hung pan, but set it up to the disabled requirements. So quite often it will have like a 150 like packing behind it to push it out to the required distance from the wall.
Yeah.
And it would be set at a higher height than a normal pan. and there's other requirements like where the handrail goes. But typically they're only allowed to have a pedestal type basin, wall hung pedestal basin, and there's got to be adequate clearance between that and the toilet. So there's all these specific measurements that the bathroom has to comply with. E3, not really sort of core plumbing stuff, but there's probably a few things like these things that are relevant potentially, and obviously if they'll go wrong, you can't say I didn't know about it. You're actually supposed to preemptively find out about it. So prevention of fungal growth, overflow requirements, water splash protection. So it could be something as simple as that, vanities or vanity units or pedestal basins or whatever have to be siliconed between the unit and the wall to stop water splashing back and going down behind the unit, damaging the wall. So might be something that you kind of take for granted, just do because that's makes it look nice or whatever, but it may actually be a building code requirement as well.
Yeah.
G13 covers acceptable materials, water trap requirements, discharge pipes, a whole range of stuff on that, sizing of pipes for different fixtures when you're combining them all together, vent requirements, water tightness, testing of all those systems. G12 is all about the water supplies, so supplying water at adequate temperature. So if it's a personal hygiene fixture, it will have to be tempered to 45 degrees currently. It's likely that they're going to change that to 40 degrees. That's what they were consulting on recently. So eventually, MB, which is the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, were reviewing some of these building code documents, including G12, not that long ago. And one of the things that they were consulting on was that they would drop the maximum temperature from 55, to 50 degrees for most installations, and drop early childhood and old folks' homes from 45 to 40.
Right.
A lot of early childhood places are actually required by the Ministry of Education to have it at 40 degrees anyway, so it's kind of like a non-match up there. So every now and then these documents get updated. So usually you'll see there'll be a version change. With standards, when they update, they also do version changes, but every now and then they come out with a new version or have a new year. So at the moment, for example, with gas fitting, the current legal version to follow for doing gas fitting work is the 2013 edition, and it's up to about Amendment 4. But there is a 2022 edition, which is in Standards New Zealand's website, but because it's not quoted in the gas safety and measurement regulations as being the means of compliance, it's currently actually not legal. Although it's got a higher, they basically made it a higher threshold for some things like PEX pipe you can no longer use outside than the previous version. And most things just carry over and are the same because it was there for a reason in the first place. So it's kind of doing the job, installing sanitary fixtures. Obviously, you don't kind of do them first. Typically, if you're going to install one beforehand, you're going to do your first fix. So you're going to put all your pipe work in, your drains or your waste pipes, your sanitary plumbing pipes, and then you're going to do your water supply, and wherever that's coming from, you may have an existing hot water system. You may be installing that as part of the job if you're doing a whole project. And really, although the fixtures are sort of what people see in the end use, and it's all the work in behind it before you do it that's equally as important. So depending on what the fixture is, some things are pretty basic and generic. If you put it in a vanity and it's going down to the floor, you've got a whole heap of flexibility as long as you put the pipes roughly in the middle of where it's going, and you know, have the hot and cold and the waste pipe at a reasonable height, you can make it work with just about anything. But
Yeah.
if you're doing a wall hung pedestal basin with a shroud or something, you know, you'd have to actually ideally have it there on site and have the trap that you're going to use and the plug and waste that you're going to have to use. So you could set it up so it was going to be bang on exactly where you want it, and the water supply was at the right height, and the flexi or whatever you used to hook it up was all going to work and look right and be nice and neat. Sometimes you can do that, like with a toilet. You can get a specification from the manufacturer. So, you know, like Coroma have got an app. They used to have a little booklet, probably still do, a brochure, and that'll tell you, okay, this one's back entry, it's to the right hand side, it's 150 off center. You know, you can do it as a P or an S trap, but you know, if it's an S, it's got to be within 100 to 200 from the wall. You know, so there's all these different things that vary all the time because there's so many different options out there that you've got to consider. So the more information you get up front, the less hassles you have downstream. Because if the whole thing's finished, tiled, whatever it is, and you've got to rip it all that out to change, you know, move a pipe 100 mil so it works, that's a major cost. You know, the cost is basically back on you for not getting it right, unless you know, you had them to sign off some verification, or they changed it after the fact that you'd already done the work. And then it's on them to pay the cost. So you do have to be a little bit careful. And just basic stuff like making sure, you know, the cold's on the right, hot's on the left. Some places things can be back to front. Sometimes you make mistakes. You're looking at it from the wrong side of the wall. There's no jib there. You get confused and you do it the wrong way. So sometimes you can just flip the hoses on the mixer or something and cover it up. No one knows. Other times you got to fix it, you know, properly.
Yeah, I did that. I had to connect the hot valve and connect it up to the isolation valves on the thing, and I accidentally put the cold to the hot. But like, once I did it, I was like, "Oh shit!" and I had to take it off.
Yeah, and usually it's not a big deal. But you know, if you'd accidentally piped hot to the toilet, that, you know, that's not quite so easy to fix. You know, so you'd actually have to work out where you can get back to the pipe, how you can rehook it into the right supply. Is anything else coming off that, you know, suddenly it's a much bigger problem. So it's always good to kind of self-check, you know, just write with a pen on the pipe or something, hot, cold, or whatever you do, to have a little process to make sure that you got it all right.
The plumber I was working with today, we were doing a couple of apartments on the terrace out in town, and the other apprentice who used to work at my company, he left, but he didn't do a very good job of setting some things up. And we weren't too sure if the hot was actually the hot, because we assumed it was because there was lagging on it.
Yeah.
But they had already jibbed the ceiling, so we couldn't check any further. So we had to just guess and hope it was. And
it's tricky. Yeah, there's nothing worse than like trying to fit off someone else's shonky job. You know, at least if it's your own and you're having trouble with it, well, you've only got yourself to blame, and you're gonna be more careful in the future. But if you're doing someone else's one and you're having a nightmare with it, you know, especially like wall hung toilets or something, if you do commercial, you might do 20 in a day or something like that, you know, if it all goes well. But you just get one, you might do 5 in the morning if smoker, it's all sweet, all silicon, all finished, and then you get one that takes you from smoker all the way to lunch, because it just, every time you put it on, it starts leaking or whatever, you know. And it's because one measurement's 5 mil off or something. Something's just, you know, fractionally out of sync, and it's putting stress on the flush pipe or whatever it is. And that's just causing it to leak, you know. And if it's leaking a little bit, you can't leave it and pretend it didn't happen, you know.
It's going to get worse eventually.
It's only going to get worse. It's only going to, you know, people are going to notice it. So you've got to do what you got to do to get it right. And sometimes that might mean you've got to bite the bullet and cut some tiles out or whatever, get back into it a bit, and try and do it ideally without affecting the finished thing. But if it's really bad, there may be no option but to kind of pull the wall off and and have another go at it.
Yeah.
So yeah, so quite a few things to look at, and yeah, you might get something. Worst ones are probably when you don't really know, like they just say, oh, whatever, we'll go and get it next week, and you just get in there and do it, mate.
Yeah.
Probably a lemon job for a mate or something, and then suddenly they turn up with this thing, and you put them how you normally put them, and suddenly that's not going to work. That shelf goes all the way back, and there ain't no plan B. So it can be tricky. That's where a little bit of problem solving. Sometimes you can cut them really short and put a brass elbow or something, and then that'll fix the problem. It gives you enough to make it work. But sometimes things are tricky. But there's so many different products out there for different situations, like diaphragm traps or different styles of traps that aren't as bulky. So some of those new products can sometimes get you out of trouble. Oops. This is just one of showers. Not all plumbers do always do shower. Sometimes they get a contractor in just to do the shower install, but they're okay. The biggest problem with a shower is that you're quite reliant on the builder and the wall and all that being reasonable. And if you're doing a renovation, often you guarantee if it's an old house, nothing's going to be dead right. So you're kind of hoping that it's right enough for it to all kind of line up and the door shuts properly and jiggledy-piggledy it up a little bit, but you can only go so far with it. And some of the instructions, like I put in a few of the Shower King sort of Chinese ones and stuff. They're not always the easiest to follow. But you just have to be careful and systematic. And if you've done a few, it kind of sort of makes sense usually. But another big thing is, if you're going to install the shower or a wall hung venue or something, put the fixing in yourself. Don't trust someone else to do it. You measure it, you put it in.
Yeah.
You're relying on the builder to do it. We might forget it, or he might put it halfway up and think you didn't need one at the top. And guaranteed, if you don't do it, it won't be in the right place. And the other thing is, don't be mean. If you've got the timber there, just put an extra. If you've got to double up the studs for where you're going to do your fixing, at least then you're not going to miss it.
Yeah.
The other thing with showers is that you don't want a silicone inside the shower. So the design for all these plastic showers is that the silicone, obviously it's got silicone behind the base of it where the plastic liner meets the tray. Usually there's like a 30mm gap there with the bead of silicone to seal it up between the tray upstand and the jib. But that liner should, in theory, come all the way down flush, and sometimes they don't. They can be a little bit out because the walls are out and the floor's out.
I think that's happening in my house now. The shower there's like a gap.
Yeah.
The tray and the curtain.
And it's a bit funny because typically the way they're set up is that the jib goes in or the tray goes in and they jib around the tray. So the tray sits flush to the frame and then the jib overhangs 10mm. And then sometimes there's a little bit of a cavity there, and that's where the white silicone goes to seal up the whole bottom of the tray. So it's only really got that, sort of 30-25mm bead of white silicone to seal it all up.
Yeah.
So you need to put plenty in there. Don't be shy about it. But if too much squeezes out, you actually need to clean it all up and get rid of it because it'll grow black mold really quickly, being in that moist environment. So you want the silicone kind of hidden away and totally removed. And then the liner is, held on by shower bond. And you don't want them to actually have painted that can affect its stickability. So you want it bare, if only just slightly painted around the top edge so it's kind of clean. And then wipe down all the dust off it. Usually use like terps on a rag and just clean the liner as well before I stick it up, so that doesn't have any sticky marks or dust on it, so they stick properly.
Yeah.
The other tricky thing sometimes is if it's been tied up for too long, or it's been like they bought it and left it for 2 years, like they don't spring out properly.
Yeah.
and that's a bit of a pain. You really have to wedge them back in position. Sometimes it's not so bad if it's all ready to go, because you can use the shower mixer and the slide shower and all that, and that helps pull it all back to the wall. But when you put the door on, but yeah, it's not the easiest thing to always get perfect or get right. And then same with that. Once you put that all on, usually put silicone behind the railing that goes back to the wall. That seals that. You wipe it all off, get rid of any excess that squeezes out. And then the door and the return sit in there. And typically you seal them on the outside at the end. It does depend on the unit a bit, but you don't seal the inside of them, because that would all just go all horrible. And then try and get it all level and what have you. Screw it all up. The other thing that's good to have is a little mini different drill bit set. So if you break a drill bit, you've got the spare one, it's the right size, because if you oversize it, the screw won't go in, or if it's too small, the screw will snap because it's got too much stress on it.
Yeah.
Stainless steel screws are quite brittle, so when they snap, the head just snaps off, stuff like that. So it is a bit tricky, but a lot easy. Some things are a lot easier with two people, but it is quite doable with one person.
Yeah.
What's that one? So let's start. Toilet instructions. Obviously, yeah, once you've installed one, the other ones are going to be relatively similar. Some kits are fully built up, so all the systems all made and installed for you. Others, it all comes in pieces and you've got to put it all together. But yeah, basically you've got your water inlet, and then you've got the flushing bit, and that's about it. So there's not too much in there. And likewise, if you're going to maintain it, there's only a couple of things that can go wrong. The underwater washer that seals it when it's full up and you haven't pushed the button, and then the water inlet either needs adjusting, or the washer and that can fail over time as well, and it keeps filling up regardless of what's happening with the flow. Yeah, so that's basic Caroma system, close coupled like most toilets seem to be these days. Pretty heavy moving a close coupled toilet in, especially when you've got to lift it over the brackets, when they've got those internal brackets like the L bracket.
Yeah.
So they can be quite tricky, and if they've got the little gooseneck type bit as well, so you've got to try and line up all that. If it's fully flush back to the wall, then you can't really see if it's leaking very well. You can only poke your head through the little holes, either where the seat goes. Sometimes they have a hole on the side as an alternative inlet, so you can sometimes see in there, but occasionally you can't really see the whole picture. She had one leak between the system and the toilet, and it was leaking down into the cavity at my parents' house, which was a bit of a nightmare. And it was so minor that I couldn't tell and didn't notice, even though, quite thoroughly flushing it multiple times. It was only when I went back up there, a week or so later, and the floor was quite sort of wet, that I realised that there was a problem. So took it all out. Ended up, I think it was tightening up between the system and the toilet a bit more.
Oh, okay.
Just because one was quite difficult to get to, if you don't have a super long screwdriver or something, or it was whatever it was. I think the inlet was in the way a bit, so I ended up taking that out and doing it up properly. And I actually had another one for another job I did, and it had a factory plug, which was an alternative inlet, and it just had sort of a plastic cap on a blanking plug, and that plastic plug was a bit loose, and it was just weeping out of there. And so that was just another weird one. So it's just sometimes they're really difficult.
Yeah.
Probably ideally, if you're doing it all the time, you get something like a camera on a stick or something like that. You can get little basic inspection cameras or something that would kind of be a bit more of an ass covering exercise. You could actually see what's happening in a place you can't visually see everywhere. like looking back up under the system. But I wouldn't buy one at your stage of the apprenticeship. But if you're self-employed, that might be something worth having. No, so that would have been a quick demo. That looks like a bidet toilet seat, which is they're a bit dodgy. That's another sort of funny area where a bidet, because it's a sanitary fixture, it's high risk. So a bidet, if it's supplying water below the rim, which these things do, should technically have, should have a high level backflow protection. So it should be RPZ protected. But most of them, if they come with any backflow protection, only come with a plastic dual check that's untestable. So to install them compliantly is actually a major expense, and there's realistically not a hell of a lot stop someone sticking one on their own toilet, even though it's technically illegal. That's what they want to do. Who would know? So that's a bit of a funny one. It's just, you should be careful if you take on that kind of job. The other thing is, if it's a domestic house, even if it's got an RPZ, there's no requirement for them to get it tested annually to prove it's still working. So like there is with a commercial building. So installing one is relatively pointless, but a requirement. Bog standard bog, very nice. So yeah, whole range of different things for them. Some you just lift the lid off, other ones you got to pop the cap up, unscrew it, etc. to get in there. Like this funny one. When you initially set it up, obviously you want to set the overflow level probably an inch at least below the internal overflow. Most everything's got an internal overflow now. Real old-fashioned ones like the old duct center flush system, they would have had an external overflow, but even some of those may be converted to an internal one. Really old systems used to have a ball clock in them, really noisy. The new ones, the flushing valves are pretty quiet. I don't know if anyone bothers maintaining the flushing valves now. It's not really worth it, because although you can buy the washer for probably $2 for most of them and replace it, and it probably will fix the problem. If it didn't fix it and you get a call back, you've just lost all the money you made on the job doing the charge out call out in the first place. Whereas if you put in a brand new one, they're getting a brand new one. It should be fine and last for X amount of years without any hassle. So it might cost them $80 or $100 plus your labor, but you and the customer are getting sort of a guaranteed result.
Yeah.
With the underwater washer, I mean, you just take out the flushing mechanism. Unless it's broken, you don't need to replace it. Pull the old washer off and stretch and slide the new one on. There are a couple of different thicknesses. So there's a thin black one, and there's a sort of thicker clear or grey chroma one, which is a bit more robust, lasts a bit longer. You just have to be careful you don't break anything doing it, because some of those things get quite brittle with age. It's a fairly nice, neat install for a basic one. Yeah, just to be careful with these plastic threads. It's quite easy to cross thread. So
Yeah.
Obviously, if you've cross threaded one, you'll know all about it. Usually they're long enough you can cut them down if you had to.
Yeah.
But it's usually quite good just to cycle it in reverse first. It kind of gets the thread lining up a little bit better in the groove, and then just take it easy, get it finger tight, make sure it is straight. Look at it from a couple of different directions, and then you're sweet as. If you did munt it, you could always possibly put a brass M&F or cut it down or something. Just got to make sure that the internal bit's not getting affected as well. We're commissioning things. So people, I think maybe this assessment, people often mistake commissioning for doing a pre-line pipework test. So if you're just testing the pipework, that's not commissioning. Commissioning is after you've done all that, basically at the end of the project, everything's finished, you've installed all your fixtures, whole thing's done, then going around doing your final checks to make sure it's all correct. So it could be checking the temperature at your outlets. It could be checking the flow rate to make sure that's okay. It could be checking the water level in a header tank or whatever it is. In some cases, if you're doing a water supply, it could be doing commissioning a water supply. So, you know, you might have tested it and then you might chlorinate it and all the rest of it. But that's, you know, not really what you do in a domestic house situation. So sometimes I accept those questions as well, but those types of answer. But it's more, you go around and you check everything, temperatures are right, you know, the hot water system's right, everything's working, drains work, there's no leaks, you know, sort of stuff. In theory, before you test it, you should pre-flush all your pipe work to get any debris, hemp, thread tape, bits of plastic out.
Copper.
Yeah, little copper shavings. Yeah. So sometimes people do that. Sometimes they don't, and then they don't kind of turn it on and flow any water through it until they've finished it all. So if it's got a strainer, which most new taps, mixers and that do, it's a good idea to take that out before you do it so you don't jam it up with shit, which can affect the flow from it.
Yeah, the bathrooms we were checking, I think we were doing exactly this today. He went through the bathrooms and we were wondering why the basin, the mixer wasn't really letting anything come out, and he took it off and all the copper shavings were there.
Yeah, and usually you can, you know, blow that out or flush it out by putting it upside down and whatever. But ideally, the best practice would be to flush it a little bit better at the pre-line stage, so you get most of it out, and then you know you might get a little bit extra stuff as you do, you know, do the final fit off or something. But it shouldn't really be too much unless you get a big bit of thread tape or something stuck in there somewhere. But you know, it could even be dirt. You know, if you did a water main, you might have jammed the pipe into the dirt and didn't realize during the fitting on, and you know, a whole load of dirt comes through. So potentially, you know, those copper shavings could damage a new ceramic cartridge. You know, so strainers are supposed to protect that, but there's not strainers on every single individual outlet. Usually there's one at the inlet to the building, and that's about it. So just try to minimize that stuff in the pipeline in the first place and flush it out. These your old-fashioned tap works. So this brass bit here is called the jumper. Sometimes they're plastic, they're usually brass. That's the washer. That will screw down into the body and the seat. The water comes from underneath. Then you've got a body washer. That's sitting up there on the main body, sealing that up. And then the internal O-ring. So that's sort of the main bit. That's what stops all the water squirting out by the handle. So between that and the body washer. So if you're servicing a tap, rather than just replacing the washers, you should inspect the other ones. If the O-ring is no longer round and it's sort of flattened off on the edges, replace that with one the right size. Likewise, if the body washer is, they're fiber washers, so they tend to stick and fall apart. If that's had it, replace that as well. Lube up the whole spindle, the threaded bit, and the O-ring. Carefully screw it back in, and then you should have a tap that runs nice and smooth and shuts off and is easier to operate. Need to check the seat as well. So typically the seat is on the taps is brass. They used to do stainless inserts for worn seats. I don't know if you can still get those, but you can use a tap reseating tool and take the seat back down to a smooth surface if it's got a wear line in it. If it's been leaking for a while, what happens is it cuts a groove in the seat where the water's trickling through, and you've got to take it right back to its flush again to fix it. It's a good idea to have like a drink bottle or something to flush some of those brass shavings out as well before you put it all back together. This one here has got a mini ceramic cartridge for an individual tap, so it basically replaces that with a mini ceramic cartridge. They're the two bits of ceramic in there, and they basically overlap like a shower mixer to let water through when it's in a certain position. So it's basically about a, I don't know, 90-degree turn or something from fully open to fully closed. It's this one you turn the handle several times. It's a set tap resetting tool. They don't always fit perfectly because there's a whole heap of different taps in the threaded part. Sometimes it's rebaited down lower, sometimes it sits higher. So you can only do what you could do. I think it's good to do a disclaimer first and say, well, I will, attempt to do it. I can't guarantee until I take it apart. I don't know the condition of the seat or the components, even if, so basically let them think that, it's possible that you may have to replace it, but I'll try and fix it. And if I can, lucky you, sort of thing.
Yeah.
A reseated tap is not going to last as long as a brand new one, so as well. But they come with, you get that when you buy a new one, they've got a 20mm head and a 15mm head, as well as this tapered bit that you can switch over to do a bath tap if you're doing a 20mm bath tap. And you just want to adjust it so it's just touching it by screwing the main section down, this bit here. So you screw that into the tap with it loose, then you wind that down till it just touches it, and then you spin this around by holding it so it doesn't over tighten, and just skim it very gradually. You don't want to go grind. You just want to skim it and do a little bit more, skim it, take it out, check it, flush the stuff out, make sure it's all nice and gold shiny looking. If there's a black line through it, keep going till you get it all nice and smooth. Yeah, it was my tap maintenance tricks. With ceramic cartridges, it's okay if you know exactly what tap it is, but even like Method might have 20 different cartridges, over the last 20 years. So it can be really difficult to find the exact correct cartridge. And, obviously they want it done now, not in a week's time. So, an old tap doesn't necessarily tell you what cartridge it's got in it very clearly, or what specific brand it is or something. So unless you've got it in your stock of half a dozen that you might have, basically, say, replace it with a new one would probably be the go. Then all the chrome and everything else is like new as well. You're not coming back. So what's it there? Oh, I cancelled it. Anyway. So we sort of covered some of this already. I think what we'll do next, there's too much extra there. So looked at all that, but it is important to know what your specification is. Yeah, if you've got the toilet there, you can just go and measure it up, but and it will come with a A4 sheet of instructions telling you what the specs are anyway. Ones you've got to watch out for are like wall hung pans, and you got to watch out also for the finished floor level. So especially they can be quite low anyway where they sit. So you've got to set the bracket up and everything, and you've got to consider the finished floor level. So if it's a wooden floor like this and that's going to be the end one, well, that's fine, that's great, that's what it is. But in like a hospital, sometimes they build it up 30mm or something across the bathrooms to put a heap of fall on it. So read the specification document, or just ask the other tradespeople that are there if they know.
Yeah.
If they look like they're going to know, if the tiler's there or whatever, hit them up and just find out, because you don't want to put it too low and then suddenly they actually don't like it. They can't even use it. They can't get back up again. And even can be worthwhile if the customer's there, potentially asking them, getting them to tell you where they want things, because if they've decided, you can't be wrong. You gave them the option. Do you want it this high, or do you want it that high? Within reason, as long as it's not, uncompliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, so typically they come with a bracket. Maintaining the in-wall systems can be a bit of a nightmare because there's access is often only through the button and there's not much room to work and make it move. So if you've got to replace the flushing washer or the inlet valve or something, it can be a bit of a nightmare. Sometimes they sort of bend to get them out. You know, they've got like whole systems. So it pays to read up on the book if you've got to do something really tricky like that, so you don't break it in the process of trying to maintain it.
Yeah.
That was just sort of going on about Seeker and how to install their various products. So you have to be a little bit, not all silicon is all the same. So bathroom silicon and sealant is like chemical curing or acidic curing, whereas the roofing one is neutral curing, with one that should be used on roofs. So if you use a bathroom silicon on color steel, it will potentially affect it and cause it to corrode, whereas the other one is designed to join it together, so it's fine.
Yeah.
But then the bathroom one has probably got a mold inhibitor in it, to reduce the mold buildup and stuff as well. So they are made for specific applications. You can get little tools as well, like they do a little scraper tool, or some people use a like an ice block stick or something. They don't recommend you use your finger to wipe it and smooth it in case you've got bacteria on the finger. It can affect it. Although, to be honest, I've always done that. It seems to be okay, but obviously you don't know what you don't see in 10 years' time or whenever. So it isn't necessarily the recommended way of doing it. I always do clean it with terps first, so it's it's not just a dirty old finger, it's one that's been cleaned. But then from a solvent perspective, putting terps directly on your finger is not recommended either. So I think we'll skip that one. It's got a few things on shower trays. That's an old-fashioned shower tray with a stainless tray, and then things were actually intentionally stepped off,
Right.
held off. So quite often they had they call it that hardboard type stuff with a plastic coating on it around it. Over time, it ended up getting a bit rotten. But a new shower is the opposite of that, where it's actually designed to be flush and seal. So there's your plastic shower type system. It's relying on the silicon to seal it. The other one was actually almost relying on the cavity to create an air gap, so it couldn't get up there. Usually the overhang was a bit more than that. It may not have even been sealed. And then you've got, people love tired shower trays. There's some that have a tray, and there's a tray systems that is designed to be tiled and the wall tiled. There's other ones that are fully dependent on the waterproofing membrane. They're probably the highest risk ones. But the waterproofing membrane won't be installed by the plumber. It'll be installed by the tiler. And that's a consented job. So even if the rest of the bathroom renovation is unconsented, because you're just giving it a renovation, the waterproofing membrane part requires a consent. And sometimes then, once they're there for one thing, they want to bring everything else up to current code standards as well. Even oddball things that don't seem related, like fire alarms and stuff, which can be a little bit of a pain.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's your acrylic liner type, run-of-the-mill one. I think they usually put 4 sheets on there, but actually there's only one. We'll just stop that. I think what we'll do is we'll just a little bit of time. Have you got any questions so far? There was only so much value.
I was just wondering if you could explain again was it the resetting tap?
Oh, yeah, yep.
Or just because I was just trying to figure that one out because I've never seen that before.
Yep.
Heard of it.
This one's a video. I've got a YouTube channel. I don't know if that's got. I don't think I've done a resetting thing on it.
G'day, I'm Ken. Have you ever used one?
We'll see if this video is any good, because so it'd be easy, even if he talks a load of rubbish. I can tell you what he should be saying. Can you see that? It's not playing, but can you see that video?
Yeah.
One of these tap reseating tools? No, neither have I.
Oh, God.
But today we're going to give it a go.
I'll mute him. Yeah, so basically you pull the tap body apart. Usually you take the handle off first, however that comes off. Usually, yeah, so a basic meth and co-fi tap, which is quite common. There's a little cap. You take the cap off, you undo the screw. You then take the handle off. Then you unscrew the shiny brass, the shiny chrome cover piece, which he's still left on there.
Yeah.
All that should come out. Usually the jumper is trapped in there. Shouldn't really float and fall apart, because sometimes water gets behind it and it causes sort of a water hammery type effect. Sometimes they do just sit like loose like that. It's depend on the design of the tap. So down there is the seat. So that's the actual body of it. This one's obviously slightly unusual in that that's kind of hidden away. It's a sort of a set.
Yeah.
So normally that quite often they're domed to start with, so that they're kind of like slightly curved. If there's nothing wrong with it, don't touch it. Don't go near it. If it's all fine, even if it's not, doesn't look shiny, doesn't have to be shiny. Just trying to torch down there, flush it out with water, stick your finger over it, make sure there's no gaps. If you're not sure, you can very lightly skim it with a resetting tool. If it comes up shiny and smooth all the way around with no grooves, you've done it. So there he's tightened it up so it's just, held centrally in position. They're fairly sloppy, especially the tapered ones. And then you hold that against it so it doesn't, otherwise it'll just keep tightening as you turn the top bit. Now he's over tightened it now because it's probably not locked up. Hasn't bound up, so it might be okay. But yeah, you're just usually holding the other two bits off each other.
Yeah.
Spin around a few times. Yeah, his one hasn't been lined up very well because it's heavily ground one side and not the other. So it should be a lot more even than that. It won't always be dead even because just how it is. But I think if he was holding that main body more firmly, it's probably because every time he turns in the same way at the same point. So he's putting more weight on the outside and he's wearing down that side.
Yeah.
So his technique's not perfect. He's going to get a result. You want to blow as much of that stuff out. He's screwed. Should be dead smooth. You can see his one looked a bit lumpy, and that's because he's ground too deeply with it instead of just skimming it.
Yeah.
So he's actually potentially what he's doing here. He's going to wreck the whole seat and screw the whole tap up. So probably get away with it, but if you did that every time you went back and did it, you're only going to be able to reset it about twice before you've stuffed it.
Yeah.
So there he's talking about he's overdone it. Now he's going to hold that. If you can't hold it with your hands, there's something wrong with you. You shouldn't have to hold it with some multis.
Yeah.
Speed it up a bit. So he hasn't even taken this part of it because that handle should come off. So looks like he doesn't know how to take the handle off. This one's got 2 O-rings, which is a bit unusual. Normally they only have 1. Don't do that. So what you want to use is just a little electrical size screwdriver, like real thin, skinny one. They're junk anyway, those O-rings. I mean, you could cut them off with a craft knife or something.
Yeah.
It's pretty weird to have 2 O-rings on there. You only have 1. May have 1 where it's not supposed to have 1. You want to make sure they're right size. I wouldn't necessarily use that. But yeah, just a rag is helpful. Just clean it with a rag. Slide the new O-rings on where the old one went. It's probably too coarse. Too much damage. So what he hasn't done is he hasn't re-lubed the spindle at all. So the tap, is potentially still going to not run that smoothly.
Yeah.
So he's going to stick the O-ring on. He's probably going to stick this crappy plastic jumper in there, which is probably going to give him more problems than. Sometimes if you get like the water hammer with the tap, what happens is the water gets around the jumper and then pushes down on the top of it, which causes it to smash or fire the washer closed, and then the pressure builds up, pushes it open, and it goes boom, 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 right on that tap. So that's because the jumper's not captured and it's kind of falling out. So sometimes you can find a thicker jumper that will just go in there, or if you just take it outside and tap it with a hammer, it makes it slightly oval, so it squeezes in there tighter and can stay there.
Yeah.
Looks like a Chroma tap set. This one, similar to their one. But he should have wound that whole spindle out and lubed it so it freed it up and made it work properly.
Yeah.
Although it might be a cheapy one and you can't actually get the handle off, but. Because all that shouldn't be there when you put that back on. You should tighten it up. The other thing to be careful of, when you tighten it up, you want to make sure the tap's wound fully up. So if it's wound down and you tighten up, you just crush the new washer that you just put in there against the seat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you actually damage it or bend the whole spindle or something. So you wind it fully up, and then you put it in and tighten it up, and then you can wind it down into the off position.
Yeah.
The other thing is, if it's really old, especially if it's been leaking internally or something, it can be really hard to get that chrome cover off. Like he just went in there with that pair of multis on there. So that is something I've done before, is used multis. But sometimes the only way to get it off is to squeeze it so tight it's actually going to damage the chrome. It's going to dig and bite into it and whatever. So, if you have spares from old ones, keep a few spares, because you can save one you're wrecking somewhere else and stick it on and make it look all right. But that's where that telling them, let them know beforehand. I can't guarantee it's going to be perfect,
Yeah.
And if you know you're going to have a problem like that, let them know. If I carry on, it's going to damage the cosmetics. Usually they won't care, but so otherwise I can't actually do it. It's that or nothing, or that or put a new one in, or whatever.
Okay. No, cool. Thank you.
Guideline documents as well, which like this one here from MB. And there's a specific plumbing section, plumbing, drain line, gas fitting. So that's probably the document that you want to look at. We'll go down to it so we can see what it is.
Is that in that are those documents in that link that you shared the other day?
Should be, yeah. If not, I can put it there. Yeah.
No, I was just gonna email you and ask you if you could email the link to me, because it wouldn't work when I was trying to search it up the other day.
Okay, yep. Sweet as, yep, I can do that. Yeah, so basically, there's a number of things: repair and maintenance, drain laying maintenance, basic repairs. You can replace a water heater with an existing, the same type. You can install, go from low pressure to a gas instantaneous. Gas fitting self-certified, but you don't have to get a consent for that. if you go from low pressure electric to mains pressure electric, that's actually a consent required job, although often it would go under the radar potentially, which is illegal technically. So if you got kind of caught out doing that, you would have an issue. So you are also allowed to re-alter stuff in your bathroom. So what you can't do is add additional fixtures. So if you're adding something extra, like you're putting another ensuite on, you want a toilet in a basin in your garage or whatever, that requires a consent. That's something extra. But if you've got your existing bathroom with a toilet, shower, basin in it, you can do what you like in there as long as you're not adding anything extra. So you can move them all around all over the place, provided you're a licensed plumber. So you can take the toilet from one wall and put it on the other wall and do the same thing with the shower. Doesn't need a consent. Would only need a consent if you were going to do a tiled shower and you had to get a consent on the waterproofing. But just moving things around within it is an unconsented building project. It still has to meet all the same requirements. It's got to be done compliantly. It's got to be done by a licensed person, but it's unconsented job. Just like if you went and repaired a toilet. So it's a bit more major than that. But.
So when you say consent, that means exempt from needing consent.
Yes, yeah. So the wording of the question in that assessment is not particularly good, but what they're meaning by it, or what they're intending to mean, is that so it says when replacing a bath with a shower, will the work be exempt? What they mean is it'll be exempt from requiring a building consent.
Yes, right. No, I get that now. I understand.
Yeah, so it's not a very well worded question. Find that document.
Like for question 3, where it says the owner wants to install a new toilet, does that mean replacing the existing new toilet, or a new toilet apart from the toilet they have already?
I lost my document.
I was assuming it just meant like adding another toilet to the house.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I'm just trying to get the bloody file back up. I've opened it. I've got it in there. I can't see it. So maybe I shut it inadvertently. My computer's not enjoying me at the moment. I had it open, then I tried to move it, and then I lost it. So I just stopped sharing it. Maybe I've got too much stuff happening at once. I'll shut it and try again. Oh, here it goes. It's just appeared. You still there?
Yep.
Okay. I might have lost you. Yeah. So yeah, they're very vaguely worded because you could interpret both of these things probably either way. So yeah, so when it says when replacing a bath or a shower, will the work be exempt? What they mean is exempt from requiring a building consent.
Yeah.
That's specifically what they actually mean. And who can do the work? You need to be complying with the PGDB Act and their requirements to do plumbing work, because it's restricted plumbing work in that case. The owner wants to install a new toilet. This isn't a new toilet in their existing bath. This is what they mean is an additional toilet that they didn't have already.
Yeah.
So,
which would be a building consent on question 4.
It will require a building consent. So it's not exempt from consent, it will require a consent. Now, if they wanted to install a new toilet to replace the old one, that would be exempt from requiring a building consent. So it's not very clear in their question what they're actually asking you. the clearest thing is when they're asking for the answer, that the answer happens to be a building consent. But then it talks about temperatures. So in terms of the temperature stuff, so G12 sets out the maximum and minimum, the temperature requirements that a tempering valve's got to deliver things to. So like I said, sanitary fixtures have to be provided with, or personal hygiene fixtures have to be provided with water, tempered water. Non-personal hygiene fixtures like kitchen sinks, laundry tubs, commercial slop sinks, whatever else it is, don't have to be tempered at all. So you could deliver water at those at 80 degrees if you wanted to. 70 is probably more reasonable. Do you know what temperature a hot water system has to be? A storage water hot water system has to stay above?
No.
Okay, so at least once every 24 hours, like mains pressure or low pressure hot water cylinder must be set, the thermostat must be set above 60 degrees. So 60 is the minimum for that. Usually they're set at 65, maybe 70, but usually 65. And then you're tempering it down to 55 for a normal house, or even less if it's an early childhood or old folks home. So those temperatures are set in G12. You actually have to reference that document in the question as well. So you've got to watch out for these double-barreled questions where they ask you two questions in one.
Reference meaning go show where it is in G12?
Yeah, so at the very least you need to say the document. So New Zealand Building Code G12. If you want to get technical, you could look it up and say the exact clause. So for example, find our meeting again. Oops.
Because I'm
yeah. So for example, if I looked up, if we go through and look up G12, so it's easy enough, just Google it. If you want to look at all the other documents, they're all there. Go back to my G12. Sure, I'm on the right and latest version. So you want to look up, okay, blah blah blah. Here's my contents. Temperature control devices. It's probably a reasonable start point. Oops.
So did you go 3rd edition 12 amendment? Amendment 12?
Yeah, so you usually do the yeah, it's 3rd edition, yeah, 12th amendment. It's usually the top one on the left side. Sometimes for some documents, it will, the first one that's showing, instead of being the actual document, is like acceptable, the amendment to acceptable solution. So sometimes you got to go down until you get the full document.
Yeah.
They'll all have a similar cover to that currently. And you want to make sure it's the big file, so it should have, at least 50 odd pages. So it's got all the stuff about cylinders with the kind of tempering part taken away from it. That temperature control stuff isn't actually specific to what they're talking about. That's just about the element, the thermostat and the fact that it's got a over temp cutoff. What you're looking for in this case is all about tempered water. So basically this figure 16 is going to tell you all about it, but also down here, safe water max temperatures. So these are temperatures there. And I think there's a couple of different questions in it. So one of them talks about a rest home, which would be this lower temperature. There might be another one that talks about the kitchen or something. So yeah, so if you to say deserving building code G12, section 6.4 or 6.14. That's your reference, and then you just say the temperature that it should be set to.
Right. Okay.
You'll be fine. Then he talks about potentially an untempered supply. Okay, it's too cold. You got to think a little bit, why would it be too cold? So this is all actually linked to the same scenario question at the retirement home. So why would he have it cold and the other one's hot? You've got to come up with a reasonable solution. So sometimes people have put an answer, but it doesn't actually make any sense.
Okay.
In terms of reality. So think about, why was his one cold? There's a couple of plausible reasons. Could be that he's got a tempered supply and that's keeping it cold. Shouldn't have been tempered.
Yeah.
Maybe there's not enough water in the cylinders going cold. Maybe there's a fault with the system, but that's probably less likely because everyone else would be complaining as well.
So with some of these questions, it doesn't need to be like for example, how you said that it could be the tempering valve, but you could also say that there's something wrong with the hot water cylinder. You could just say that as one of the answers and explain what to do with that.
Yeah, potentially, as long as it's a reasonable answer.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I wouldn't say there's something wrong. You need to be specific and say exactly what's wrong, potentially. Because you don't know. It's like, if a customer rings you up and say, "Oh, I've got no hot water," well, it could be a whole range of things. It could be the tempering valve shit itself, and they've actually got lots of hot water, they just can't get it out. It could be that they've got no power and the hot water system's fine. Could be that the element is crapped out. It could be that the thermostat on the cylinder is crapped out. It could be that the TPR is going off. It's dumping all the water constantly. So there's no one set answer until you get there and start to look at what you've got and what is working and what isn't. So, and with these scenario ones, as long as you've come up with something that's reasonable, that's got to be okay.
Right. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
I found a couple of other questions on the other assessments where I wasn't too sure if it wanted one specific answer, or if because there could be multiple things wrong with it, I choose one of them and explain.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, like on the hot water one, it's like water's coming out the relief valve. Well, it could be the relief valve. It could be the pressure reducing valve, is failed. It could be the thermostat is overheating the cylinder. So there's nothing wrong with either of the valves, but it's relieving the pressure because that's the only place it can get out. So, if there's generally potentially multiple things, I wouldn't necessarily just put one.
Yeah.
Probably for this one is okay, but for that valve one and the cylinder one, it'd be better to have at least two possible reasons.
Okay.
Because it's kind of like, what's your approach? You go there, water's coming out of the valve on the roof. What do? Do you initially go up there, climb up on the roof and change it? Maybe, but maybe you try something that, like you just adjust the pressure reducing valve, or you check the temperature or something.
Yeah.
Then you didn't have to climb on the roof. So that was that was your last resort.
Yeah.
There's a few questions on G1. So, if you want to get G1, you can just do what you did to get G12. Change it to G1. It'll pop up, and then just use the contents to find what you're looking for.
Yeah.
That first one there, it's got the old cover, but it's been lit. I haven't updated that one for a while, but whatever you're looking for, what's the minimum distance? So you're gonna have to go to accessible bathrooms, fixture urinals, space, probably 16. There you are. So there's that accessible toilet department, so you could go there. You've got to then interpret what the question's asking.
Yeah.
Minimum distance. So yeah, it's all there. It's just you've got to find it.
No, awesome. Thank you.
If there's any other major problem ones in there? Maybe the dialysis machine. Do you know what you have to do if you're delivering a place with a dialysis machine?
Nah, not too sure with that. I'm not too sure what it is that for someone with
Yeah. So Jonah Lomu, he had this kidney problem.
yeah,
and it
yeah,
affected his career. So he had to go regularly on a dialysis machine to keep him alive. And ultimately, they could do a kidney transplant. I think he had a transplant, although he still had some complications. He only had one kidney instead of two after that. And then he'd had several years of the effects of not having one working properly. So while people are waiting for a donor, to stay alive, they have to go on a dialysis machine. So what it does is it does what your kidneys do for your blood. So it kind of cleans your blood, takes out impurities and stuff like that. So it's an artificial machine that does that. It also uses water, and water flows through it. Obviously, we don't want people's blood in any way, shape, or form getting back into the town's water supply.
right.
Actually contaminated, because you know what else wrong they've got with them. So that's the big issue there, is really protecting that. There's other things that aren't really relevant so much, in that the power companies legally not allowed to turn their power off if they've got a known thing that relies on power to protect their health, because there's a couple of situations where they shut the power off, they didn't pay the power bill, but they were chronically ill, and then they died as a result of it. So they changed the law after that. But from a plumbing perspective, it's about ensuring that the potable water is protected. So at the beginning of G12, there's a big spiel all about backflow and backflow protection. So yeah, have a flick through that part of it, and you can have a look. It's going to be human bodily fluids falls into this high hazard category. So even though it may not be specific, doesn't necessarily specifically list dialysis machine, you've got to look at what is equivalent. So mortuary, anything with chemicals is always high hazard, but also human waste, sewage stuff. Obviously that's not sewage, it's blood, but it's still going to be in that high hazard category.
Yeah.
Right. Oh well, that's about it. Yeah, if you want to email me, I can probably find your email otherwise, but yeah, if you email me, that'll be easier. Then I can get back to you. I'll probably do it tomorrow.
Cool.
If that's okay.
Yeah, we're good. I want to go sleep. So
yeah, sweet. So do I. All right, cool. All right. Good one. And yeah, chase up your account manager and or Justin, the regional manager, and find out if you can get on the course this year.
Yeah.
There'll only be a couple more left to go, if any. Sure. But yes, if you want to find out about that, put in the email. I can tell you what dates the courses are that we've got left in the calendar.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you for tonight.
Awesome.
Okay. Have a good night.
Cheers. Bye.